I was born in Fargo, October 2nd, 1916, if you want that.
Yeah. It's a little while ago.
Yeah. And grew up in Fargo, attended Roosevelt Grade School and Fargo Central High. But at the time, I wasn't smart enough or enough money to go to college, so I started out, I worked for a couple of years in a neighborhood grocery store. And then just before I went in the service, I was working for Armour and Company. And in December 31st, 1941, my brother and I enlisted in the Air Force and left on New Year's Eve.
Wow.
And from there, of course, we went to Induction Center in Fort Snellings in Minneapolis. And then I went to Shepherd Field, Texas for basic training. And then I went through aircraft mechanic school there. And then I was sent to California. Had kind of luxury there, lived in a hotel on the beach in Santa Monica and went to school in Long Beach, had a factory till I think it was about July or so. And then I was assigned to a unit in Mississippi. But I know they wanted volunteers for gunnery schools. I volunteered for that, but after I got through that, I couldn't handle the low-level flights and so on, so then I was transferred to another unit in Oklahoma City, which was an A-20 low-level bomber unit. And I was with that unit from Oklahoma City, and then we transferred to Charlotte, North Carolina, and spent the better part of 3 years there, and was discharged in November of 1945. And I was in the reserves for a year, and I went back to work at Armour and Company. And then in January of 1947, they organized the Air National Guard here in Fargo, which I joined and became a full-time member and a full-time worker too, as well as being in the Guard. And I was, beginning was an aircraft mechanic, and I don't know, sometime later in the year then I was made the line chief, which was in charge of the other mechanics. And I was in that position till we got recalled for Korea in April of '51. And then we were on active duty till, well, they sent us to Georgia, Valdosta, Georgia, and the word was that they didn't know what to do with us there, so they shipped us all the way to Victorville, California, George Air Force Base, Victorville, California. And we were there till November of '52. And then I came back to the Air Guard, and shortly after that, I went into quality control, and I was there till I retired in 1976. So
what type of, when you first went to aircraft mechanics school, what type of aircraft were you learning to work on?
Well, we didn't get into that till I went to the factory school. And then it was A-20s is what I was trained on. And I did get to work on those all the time I was in the service, plus some B-25s, because we had both when we were training pilots.
So how many different aircraft did you work on during the course of your career?
Oh, well, quite a few. like the A-20s, B-25s, T-6s, C-47s, C-46s, F-94s, T-33s, F-101s, 102s, F-89s, and F-4s.
So tell me what it was like being one of the first members of the Happy Hooligans, and what were things like then as the unit was just getting started?
Well, it was hard to get going because I don't know if you've heard the story that it was a battle between Grand Forks and Fargo who was going to get the Air Guard unit. And they finally decided on Fargo, but then we had an airport manager that wasn't too happy with us coming here. And finally, at that time we were under the Corps of Engineers, there the base was. And they sent a general here one day and met with the city commission and the airport manager, and point blank told them, if you don't allow these Air Guard guys on your base after we've given you a runway and all this stuff during the wartime, there'll be a barbed wire fence across the gate in the morning. And we had no problem after that. Although that manager still gave us a hard time. Yeah. But he finally warmed up to us, and after we found out all the good we could do for the airport, he kind of went along with it, you know. Colonel Neese, he was an Air Force advisor. So actually he was our commander till they named a commander for us. See.
And who did they name?
Well, Homer Goebel was the first commander. Well, we had one, Donald Jones, that, of course, he was killed in 1949, I think it was, when we were on the hay lift out in Minot.
You want to tell us a little bit about that operation? And weren't you didn't you receive that P-50? Was that a P-51 or was that a C?
That was a P-51, yeah.
And did you receive that aircraft, or were you in charge of that aircraft, or?
Oh yeah, well it was one of our airplanes, and he was our commander then, and he went out there to see how the hay lift operation was going. In fact, I talked to him about 20 minutes before he was killed, because he called and said that he was on his way home. Well, it was stormy, probably like today a little bit, and he should never have taken off, really. Well, the hay lift was, and I think it was the winter of '49, that there was a lot of snow and really tough for the farmers out in the western part of the state. Couldn't get hay to their farmers. So they recruited the Air Guard with our C-47s to haul the hay bales, and we'd fly over these farms and drop the hay bales wherever they had designated they wanted them. And Minot was used as the base to load the aircraft. They'd haul the bales to Minot, and then they'd load the aircraft, and they'd go out wherever they were needed. And I don't know, I can't recall just how long, but it was cold weather, and we had a tough time keeping the airplanes going. But they'd bring, in one other state, came in to help us, but I don't recall which one. But we'd bring our 47 back to Fargo at night to keep it indoors overnight. And then they'd fly back to Minot in the morning and fly up the bales. Oh, I was going to tell about the fellows that were in the airplanes kicking the bales out. We were concerned about them falling out. So we put ropes around their middle and tied them, you know, a short distance from the where they were kicking the bales out, so they were sure they wouldn't fall out. And I remember one of the fellows saying when they come back, I says, did you get the bales where they wanted them? And he says, well, I think I put one right in the guy's barn, but I don't know if he wanted it there or not. But that was an interesting operation. And one year, an interesting thing, we had a young fellow in Fargo here that had polio. And of course they didn't have the means to treat it well here, so we, with our C-47, transported him with the iron lung and everything to another hospital. So that was a special mission too that we did one time.
How far away was the other hospital?
Boy, I don't remember, but it was quite a job to rig up equipment to keep the lung running and so on. But the old city armory, we sandbagged that one summer, or one spring, I guess it was, and all the bags were filled by hand, hand shoveled into the bags. So.
Were you
Was
involved?
it 40? Oh,
Go ahead.
did you respond at all to the Fargo tornado? I'm trying to think that would have
Oh,
been
yes.
the time that
Oh, yes.
the
I
Hooligans started.
I stood on the corner of 15th Avenue and Broadway all night, the first night, trying to keep people from going into because the word was, don't let anybody go beyond this point.
And you were the one man stopping them.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
So, well, I lived on 1500 block on 4th Street, and it just missed us by a half a block. And but it was bad. And we the guard controlled traffic and so on for, I don't know, must have been a couple of weeks or more, till everything got back in order again, where they could go up and down the streets and so on.
What was it like when, we talked a little bit about when the Hooligans started, but how often did you drill at that point in time, and how much did you get paid?
Oh boy, I don't remember that, but it wasn't very much. But we met once a month, I believe it was.
Okay.
And then, of course, we had to do our 15 days every summer. Mm-hmm. And the first summer camp we had was out here. And tents and mud and what have you,
What did it turn into?
Well, it turned out pretty well. But this niece, he had some really weird ideas, about up early in the morning, and guys had been in the World War II and they didn't want to go back to that stuff, But anyhow, it turned out pretty well, except that the rain really got to us. But we did get our missions done and all that stuff, and we got in a lot of training for the first summer camp.
How big was the unit then? How many?
Fighter unit. It was called the Fighter Unit, 178th Fighter Squadron.
About how many men were part of the unit?
Oh boy, I have no idea.
Did you talk about the charter member, and you said there's 3 or 4 left alive?
Three left.
And do you know who they are?
Yeah, Marshall Johnson and Homer Goebel and myself.
And Marshall and Homer were commanders?
Well, at that time we had, one was the base commander and one was the squadron commander. So, but then after the years we got so one commander was over everything, see.
Was Pappy right along that time frame too, or?
No, he was a little later. He didn't come into the unit till around the Korean time.
What were you doing during the Korean time? Didn't a lot of people get mobilized to Moody or something?
Well, that's why I told her
Oh,
we went to
did we?
Moody, to Valdosta at Moody Field. But when I was on active duty, I worked in the Inspector General's office, which was pretty good duty.
Pouring coffee or what?
Oh, no. We went around to see if everybody was doing things right. But the was kind of tough because when I was telling you about this airport manager, he wasn't going to, well, you're familiar with the old hangar we had. Well, he wasn't going to let us, we had to go get a permission to get a key every day to even get in there. You know, it just made it tough for us all the way around. But once we got in there, and the first or 2 winters, I think it was, there was no heat of any kind. We had ground heaters to run with gasoline, and we'd run those. And the story we passed around was when the sparrows drop, shut the heaters off, because all the exhaust was getting to the birds up there. But it was, yeah, we had some pretty tough times, but everybody worked together, and, you know, it's how we accomplished what we've got today, I guess.
Did the history or the legendary, or what's the word I'm looking for, did, you know, the reputation of the Happy Hooligans start pretty early, or?
Oh, yes. Once we started, you know, competing with other units, we, well, you probably know we were the first ones that ever got an outstanding maintenance award in the outside of the Air Force. But then too, when we go to conferences and that, we'd say, well, how come you guys are doing it this way? Now come here, and they'd always come to our place to find out how we were doing it. So that was kind of good.
What was your favorite aircraft?
Oh, the P-51, I think.
Brand new?
No, they weren't new. They were quite new, but
What made it your favorite?
what?
What made it your favorite?
Well, I don't know. It's just the sound of it, I guess.
Yeah.
It's this one, when it goes, it just kind of gets to you. Well, I don't know. I like the ones I worked on during World War II, the A-20s. It was a real good sound airplane.
You said you left in '73. Was that the F-4 or was that the?
The what?
What aircraft did you leave when you retired?
Oh, they were just getting F-4s.
So what was it like seeing all of these changes over the course of your career? Tell me some about how things differed from when you got in to when you got out.
Well, the big thing is when we first started, you would, if you had to change a tire, you'd change a tire. You know, anybody. But now, you have one guy, he changes tires. He can't touch anything else on the airplane. Or if you had to change a hydraulic pump and it's hooked up to electric wire, you change the pump, but the electrician has to come and put the wire on. In our days, we did the whole thing. So that's a big difference, I think. But then you have, you know, now you have propeller specialist and a hydraulic specialist and all this stuff. Well, we had to be familiar with all of that. Of course, you got to understand too that the airplanes are more complicated nowadays too. But even at that, it's kind of silly to say you're right there and you can't hook a wire onto this. You got somebody else to come and do it.
Do you stay pretty connected to the Hooligans still?
Not really. I don't really know. We have our retired group that meets once a month. But other than that, I don't. Well, you're probably one of the last ones I know over there. So.
Any names that come to mind from the past that you had a story about, or I know Art Breyer.
Oh yeah, Art Breyer. Well, Art Breyer, our parachute packer. I remember one time we were in a parade. He and I were in the color guard, And he was carrying the American flag, I think, and I was carrying the squadron flag or whichever. And it was windy, and we had to stop. And when he raised the flag up again, the pole broke. And he carried that broken thing in his hand through the whole parade like that. It chewed up the whole inside of his hand. Now that was a true soldier there.
Got a favorite commander?
Oh, not really. But
I saw one was here possibly. Was that Wally Haig that was standing down here?
well, I don't know if I didn't notice
Okay.
that. No, Schrader.
Well, that was
Schrader, yeah. But you know a story about him is that he joined the Guard in 1949, and I was the line chief and of the mechanics, and he was assigned to me as a recruit mechanic. And here he ends up as general.
You probably have a few stories like that.
Well, McDonald was one too. I remember him when we had a little class teaching the guys about the airplane and that, and we got to a certain point to get to start the airplane and run it. And I remember the night he got in and started the airplane. He got the feel of the throttle and all that stuff. He says, God, he says, I got to fly one of these. So I think that got him started, you know. So little things like that.
Any story about Pappy, you know, or were you at Volk Field when they got their name?
Oh yeah, yeah. In fact, I was help spread the word because every time we'd go to a conference of any type, we had all these little hooligan stickers. Every elevator we went up, there was hooligan stickers in it. Hotel rooms, wherever we put them.
They're all over the world now.
Yeah. And even, but you know, there was a Navy outfit that had the same nickname. Because one time we were somewhere and one of the fellows set his grip down and had hooligan sticker on it, and this fellow says, "Oh, I see, Navy guy, huh?" And he says, "Oh no," but he says there are some happy hooligans in the Navy. He says so. But
Did you have any? Did you work with the Army National Guard at all, or like flooding and tornadoes and that? Were they?
no, it just well, they had a little different part than we did, you know. But
I mean, like nowadays, it's pretty joint. We do a lot of things together.
Yeah.
Back then, not.
well, they'd furnished equipment mostly, you know, like one of those. I remember that one spring, they had one of these big boats, you know, on wheels. Because I and another fellow ended up driving it back to Devil's Lake.
How was that?
Oh, that was neat. But in the early days too, I should tell you about when they had snow, you know. We had 28 P-51s at one time. Well, actually, we had 35 airplanes at one time. Different ones, but 28 51s. Well, anyhow, in the wintertime, like you get a windstorm, you know, like in snow, these airplanes were just about all covered. And we didn't have a front end loader or a bucket loader or a bobcat to do it. We'd go out there, we'd have to shovel them out. Then we'd have to wait for the city to come with their blower, and they'd make a path for us. And then we'd hook onto each airplane individually after we shovel out in front of the wheels.
You pull those up by hand then, or did you?
No, we had a small tractor to do that. But then get the ramp all cleared, get them all parked up in a nice row, and come back in the morning, same thing all over again. So,
I remember last time we talked, I think this story's true. You told me that they would run off the end of the runway a lot.
oh yes, we had a few of those. Yeah. But one guy cartwheeled off the end run. I don't know how he did that, but
Oh, is that how the? Weren't you telling me that's how the club name?
oh no. Well, that was from, boring into the ground like an auger. That's how they got the name Auger Inn.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, that's
So
one
what's
thing.
the
I was
story
president of the Auger Inn for 3 times.
Wow. Do you visit that auger inn anymore?
Well, just when they have something special, or once a year anyhow. But that was an interesting project too. I was in on buying the first bar.
Where was that at? Was that
What-
in the dining hall?
Well, we had it built. Yeah, it was in the original dining hall. And we had it built by the old Fargo Food and Equipment Company. But that was an interesting project.
Anything else you remember like that? The auger inn, or any other clubs you were in, or?
Well, we started out, with the Auger Inn in an old, one of the old World War II buildings, and we kind of reworked the inside of it, made a makeshift bar and all that stuff, and that's how we kind of got started with the club. But
Tell me a little more about the story with the auger. I didn't catch that. Is it from the plane?
when an airplane crashes, you have the propeller going around.
Right. So it just,
Well, there is a tool called an auger, that drills holes. Well, that's where they get the deal from the propeller drilling a hole in the ground.
so there wasn't actually a plane that did that.
Oh, yes.
Oh, there was.
Oh,
That's
yes.
why I was wondering.
Oh, several. Oh, yeah. When they hit the ground, they're just going around like this, and it's just like they're trying to bore a hole in the ground, So, oh, yeah, we picked up a few accidents. None of them too serious.
Yeah, any deployments like Alaska or
Oh, yeah. We went to Alaska.
Florida?
No, I never went to Florida.
Mississippi? No?
No.
Okay.
But we went to, what's the one in Wisconsin?
Volkfield?
Volkfield, yeah, went there several times. We had talking about the Auger Inn. We bought an old bus, city bus, and converted it into like a serving counter and stuff like that. And I drove that all the way to Wisconsin one time for summer camp. But it served its purpose. We used that to drive to the flight line and serve the guys and so on. The problem was I was the wrong age group. See, I'd like to have stayed longer to get my retirement higher. But I was older than most of the fellas, so that I had to leave, when the time was up. So, no, I would have enjoyed staying a few more years. But it was a good career. I liked it.
How many chiefs do you think there was in your time frame? A lot, or I didn't think so.
I was one of the first ones. I think we had 6 when I retired.
Wow.
So, well, it wasn't even in the program, when we first started.
Yeah.
I can't remember the year exactly, but hadn't been going too many years. Well, and too, that the original program was that you would advance from a chief to a warrant officer. But that program fell through, too.
So 36 years in the Guard? How?
About 33,
33, and how long you been retired?
34.
Gotta like that.
Yeah.
So what was your favorite memory during those 33 years?
Oh boy. Boy, that's pretty hard to pin down. Because there was a lot of good times, you know. But one thing I did get, though, one time, 1959, I got a Community Service Award from the fighter group. And they only give out 2 of those that I ever knew of, and I got one of them.
What did it recognize?
For community service.
What type of particular things?
Well, I was on a church council, and I was on the credit union board, and I don't know. I was a whole bunch of things. So. But that was kind of nice. But I had a special ceremony and got presented with it and so on.
You said that your wife just passed away. Have you talked about your
Oh,
family?
this was back. She passed away in '02.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And sons and daughters, have we already talked about that?
No, I have twin daughters.
Oh.
Yeah. And one of them is a dean at the University of Minnesota. And the other one is a clinical psychologist and practiced with 2 other ladies in Omaha.
Grandkids?
I have 2 grandsons, both in school, and I have 2 granddaughters. One works for the Wild Ear Foundation in Minneapolis and just got accepted to go to a doctorate degree at the University of Madison, Wisconsin. Got $125,000 for 3 years.
Wow. You got great grandkids too then?
No.
Oh.
Then my other granddaughter, she's graduating from Luther Seminary in June and will be ordained in June. So,
A lot of
pretty good family.
accomplishments, Yeah.
Yeah. You're blessed.
what?
You're blessed.
Yes, very much.